How would Sun Tzu negotiate with Russia and Putin if he were NATO? Well, based on the art of the war, the first thing he would ask is if he should participate in the war. We will give a score out of 10 for every Sun Tzu war principles. The higher the rating, the more NATO should officially declare war on Russia from a strategic point of view. Let's talk about Sun Tzu's first principle of war: no one's enemy and no one's self. Sun Tzu's first principle when deciding whether to fight a war is how much you know of your enemy and of yourself. Sun Tzu states that if you know both your enemy and yourself well, you will never be in the losing side of the war. Believe it or not, I feel that NATO can answer the former question more easily. Putin has basically laid out its invasion plan of Ukraine and what his demands for a ceasefire are, not to mention that anonymous hackers and US intelligence can and have practically penetrated into the depths of the Russian government. Hence, virtually the whole world knows Putin's strategy and goals of the war. The harder bit is if NATO actually knows itself, and I will argue for why NATO doesn't completely understand itself. Going back to the importance of knowing your enemy, we know Putin's strategy, goals, and demands, but we don't fully understand Putin's character and mental state, since humans are by definition hard to predict. However, based on Putin's past history, Putin is actually quite a predictable dictator. He never hid his disappointment at the Soviet Union's collapse, going as far to say that it was the biggest catastrophe of the 20th century. His ultimate goal has always been to reinstate the Soviet Union, and combined with the fact that he actually said this in front of TV cameras, we know that he is somebody who is quite direct and would actually follow through with his threats, as we can see in his current war actions in Ukraine, as well as how he attacked Georgia in 2008 and annexed Crimea in 2014. Putin is also somebody who respects strength, not weakness. He saw weakness in the Obama and Biden administration and was ready to pounce both times. Trump, he thought, was highly unpredictable and might actually retaliate against Russia strongly should he make a wrong move. Hence, he decided not to invade any countries during Trump's presidency. Putin is right that NATO has decided not to militarily intervene with troops. At least that's what's happening so far. Putin's direct demeanor and non-compromising style has unfortunately indicated that he has a high possibility of following through with his threat of a nuclear war should NATO intervene. This argument is supported by Fiona Hill, a foreign affairs specialist and close Putin/Russia watcher. In fact, Russian troops have attacked Ukraine's nuclear facilities, which again shows that he's not afraid to go nuclear. This must be assessed as part of the risk imposed to NATO should they intervene militarily, which is discussed later in this video. So we know Russia well, we know Putin well to a large extent, but does NATO understand itself? NATO consists of 30 different countries and hence 30 different cultures. This alone shows how hard it is for NATO members to fully understand one another well. So far, NATO has reacted very quickly and in unity when deciding to financially sanction Putin and Russia. But would it react as quickly and as united if one of its NATO members got attacked, or if Ukraine's situation continues to worsen? Whether it's a yes or no, or in between, NATO must answer this question confidently before it decides to go into war with Russia. Also, since NATO members are not dictatorships, it must consider the public opinion of all of its member states. Does NATO have a good enough grasp of what NATO citizens demand? Most seem to support military intervention based on recent public opinion polls. Let's talk about Sun Tzu's second principle of war, which is right timing favorable geographical/environmental conditions, and favorable social conditions. Well, from a humanitarian standpoint, of course NATO should intervene militarily, but whether we like it or not, when weighing to be or not to be, we must consider the geographical politics of the entire world, not just within the EU and Russia. A major geographical uncertainty at present is whether China will invade Taiwan. It seems that the chances of this happening grows by the day. The question that NATO must ask is, if it intervenes militarily in Ukraine, does it have enough resources to fight a potential two-front war with China? The answer seems to be yes, given the US military strength, but it depends on human psychology as well. Are the majority of NATO electors and citizens psychologically ready for potential two-front war? Unfortunately, the answer seems to be no. In the case of China, let alone an all-out war, it is quite clear that NATO as a whole is not psychologically ready to sanction China financially. With China's well-documented infiltrations in Western societies and the world's reliance on Chinese goods, it seems that it will take time and significant mental preparation for most of the world to directly confront China, both financially and militarily. This leads to the issue of timing and social conditions. Insufficient mental preparation is another phrase for wrong timing, and unfortunately for Ukraine, it does take time for countries to whip up public opinion to actually make life or death decisions. Ukraine has already requested a no-fly zone, but Joe Biden from the US has already directly rejected this request. This unfortunately is in part of US public opinion. The US does not seem to view Putin as unfavorably as do most EU member states. In fact, a fair share of conservative voters is strongly against US troop deployment into Ukraine. To convince this part of the population to join in the current Russian-Ukrainian war will likely take a lot of effort, albeit most citizens in the EU seem to support the deployment of NATO troops into Ukraine. Social conditions are hence far from perfect for a full-scale war, and NATO needs to consider whether military intervention into Ukraine will lead to a full-blown war. Thanks for watching the video. We'll see you in our next part of whether Sun Tzu would declare war on Russia and Putin, and if not, what the right timing is. See you in our next video.